Beloved voices once filled every corner of Hollywood with Bruce Willis's laughter. But in this quiet moment his breath trembles, as if each word costs him a memory, and he begins by saying he is not afraid of death anymore, only afraid of the truth he waited too long to tell. The camera lingers on his eyes, softer now, clouded by illness, and yet burning with something urgent, something unfinished. He speaks slowly, as if walking through a house that used to be his, touching the walls, remembering where everything once stood. He says that when the world thinks of him, they remember explosions and one-liners and that fearless grin. But inside, he has carried a weight for decades, a secret connected to a man who once stood beside him in Hollywood's golden rooms, Rob Reiner, a name that still makes his chest tighten even now. Bruce admits that people don't understand what it feels like to lose your words before you lose your life. Aphasia has been stealing pieces of him, sentence by sentence, like a quiet thief in the night. He says sometimes he wakes up and knows there is something important he must say, but it floats just out of reach, like a dream fading in the morning. And that is why he is here now, why his family begged him to rest, but he refused because there was a truth that had followed him since the 90s, whispering to him in hospital rooms and in the long, sleepless nights beside his wife and daughters. A truth about loyalty, about silence, and about a moment when everything in Hollywood felt shiny on the outside but rotten underneath, that he remembers Rob not as a villain, not as a hero, but as a powerful man who could change the course of careers with a smile or a shrug. Bruce talks about walking into rooms where Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks laughed over scripts, where Meryl Streep's voice could command the air, and where even someone like him, a so-called action star, still felt like a kid trying to prove he belonged. He says Rob had a way of making you feel seen and invisible at the same time, praising you in public while quietly deciding your fate behind closed doors. And for years Bruce didn't know which version of Rob was real. His voice cracks as he tells a story he has never told before about a night after an awards ceremony when he and Rob sat alone in a hotel bar. The city was glowing outside, paparazzi flashing like lightning, and inside Rob leaned close and said something that changed Bruce forever. Bruce won't repeat the words exactly, because even now they hurt too much, but he says they were about power, about how Hollywood really works, about how some people are protected and others are disposable. He remembers nodding, pretending he understood, pretending he agreed, because that is what you do when you're afraid of losing everything you built. As the years passed, Bruce says he saw friends disappear from the industry, their phones suddenly silent, their names no longer spoken at parties. He thinks of actors who once shared the screen with him, men and women who cried in his arms, wondering why they had been pushed aside. Some of them blamed themselves, some blamed fate, and some whispered about Rob Reiner in hushed tones, like you might whisper about a storm you can't escape. Bruce stayed quiet, because he was still working, still being invited, still welcomed. That silence is what he regrets most now. The illness has stripped away his ability to lie to himself. There are days when he cannot remember the names of movies that made him famous, but he can remember the look on Demi Moore's face when he finally told her, years ago, that something about his success had always felt borrowed, built on someone else's pain. He can remember his daughter Rumor asking him why he looked so sad even when everyone was applauding. He can remember telling her it was just exhaustion, when in truth it was guilt. Bruce pauses, fighting tears, and says that Rob Reiner once told him that in Hollywood you either protect the machine or you get crushed by it. Back then Bruce thought it was just cynical advice. Now he realizes it was a warning. He says there were projects he took that should have gone to others, stories that were silenced, voices that were never heard, all because a few powerful men decided who mattered and who didn't. And Bruce let it happen. He went along with it. He smiled for the cameras and cashed the checks while people he loved quietly disappeared. He mentions Morgan Freeman, how Morgan once pulled him aside on a set and said that fame is a beautiful prison, that the bars are made of gold, but they are still bars. He mentions Denzel Washington, who warned him that one day the truth always comes, no matter how deep you bury it. At the time, Bruce laughed it off, but now, as his own voice fades, those words feel like prophecy. There's a moment when he stops speaking altogether, staring at the floor, and you can hear his wife in the background whispering his name, reminding him he is safe. Bruce finally looks back up and says he is not trying to destroy anyone, not even Rob. He just wants to free himself before it is too late. He wants his daughters to know that their father was not just an action hero, but a man who made mistakes, who stayed silent when he should have spoken, and who is now trying, in his final chapter, to tell the truth. The room feels heavy, like it is holding its breath with him, and Bruce says that what Rob Reiner did was not one single terrible thing, but 1,000 small choices that hurt people in ways no one ever saw. And he was part of it. That is the secret he has carried. That is the weight that has followed him into sickness and old age. And now, with his words slipping away, he is afraid that if he doesn't say more, it will all be lost forever. His eyes glisten, and he takes a shaky breath, as if he is standing on the edge of something he cannot step back from. And the story feels like it is only just beginning, even though it already hurts more than anyone expected. Bruce closes his eyes for a long moment, as if the memories are too heavy to hold all at once. And when he opens them again, there is a quiet fear in his gaze that no amount of movie stardom could ever hide. He says that after that night in the hotel bar with Rob Reiner, things began to change in subtle, almost invisible ways. Scripts that once came easily started to feel different. Conversations in hallways would suddenly stop when he walked in. Smiles were still there, but they were tighter, more careful. He realized he had been allowed into a room that very few people ever see, a room where careers are not just built, but quietly destroyed. He remembers a young actor, someone he had mentored, who was up for a role in a film Rob was producing. The kid was talented, hungry, full of that raw energy Bruce himself had once carried when he was just trying to survive. One night, over dinner, Rob casually mentioned that the actor had been difficult, that he had asked too many questions, that he didn't fit the vision. The role disappeared from the kid's life within days. Bruce watched it happen, saw the confusion in the actor's eyes, felt the shame in his own chest, and still said nothing. That silence, he says, is what keeps him awake now. As his illness slowly tightened its grip, Bruce began to understand how fragile everything really is. Words slipped away, names faded, but the faces of the people he felt he had failed stayed sharp and painful in his mind. He would sit alone in his living room late at night, the house quiet, watching old films of himself on television, and wonder how many of those moments had been bought with Omion else's suffering. He says that is the cruelest part of memory loss. The small things disappear, but the regrets remain. He talks about Demi again, about how she was the first person he ever trusted enough to tell the whole story. He remembers breaking down in front of her, confessing that he felt like a fraud, that Rob's influence had protected him while others were left out in the cold. Demi cried with him, not because she was angry, but because she could see how deeply it had been eating him alive. She told him that secrets like that don't just fade, they rot inside you. And she was right. Bruce says there were times he wanted to come forward, to tell the world what he had seen, but fear always won. Fear of losing his career. Fear of being labeled difficult. Fear of being erased the same way others had been. He watched what happened to people who spoke too loudly, how their names stopped appearing on call sheets, how their invitations dried up, how they were slowly forgotten. Hollywood, he says, is very good at pretending you never existed. The camera catches his hands, shaking slightly as he speaks, and he admits that some days he can barely form a sentence, yet these memories feel carved into his bones. He says he once ran into Tom Hanks at a charity event, and Tom quietly told him that he had heard things, that he knew something wasn't right behind the scenes of certain productions. They shared a look that said more than any words could. Neither of them said Rob's name out loud, but they didn't have to. Bruce feels the weight of that shared silence now more than ever. He says that being sick has changed the way he sees everything. When you know your time is limited, the lies you told yourself become unbearable. He looks into the camera and says he doesn't want to leave this world as just another Hollywood legend with a carefully polished image. He wants to leave it as a man who finally told the truth, even if that truth makes people uncomfortable that he admits that Rob Reiner was ever cruel to him personally. In fact, Rob often praised him, supported his projects, and helped him when others doubted him. That is what makes this so painful. Bruce says that kindness was part of the trap. It made it easier to ignore the harm happening to others. It made him feel special, chosen, protected. And that feeling, he says, is addictive in a place like Hollywood. His voice drops to almost a whisper as he talks about the night he realized he could not keep pretending. It was after his diagnosis, after he felt his words starting to slip away. He was sitting with his daughters, trying to tell them a story, and he couldn't find the right words. The frustration overwhelmed him, and suddenly he started crying. Not just for the illness, but for everything he had never said. His daughter held his hand and told him he was still her hero. That was the moment he decided he couldn't die with this secret still inside him. The air feels thick as he says Rob Reiner needs to know that he remembers everything. He remembers the deals, the quiet conversations, the power plays. He remembers the lives that were changed without anyone ever knowing why. And even if his own memory fades, he wants this story to exist somewhere, so that the truth cannot be completely erased. Bruce leans back, exhausted, but there is a strange relief in his eyes now, as if a door he kept locked for decades has finally been opened just a crack, and the light, though painful, is starting to come in. Bruce's breathing grows heavier as the memories deepen, like he is walking farther into a dark forest he once tried to escape. He says that the most haunting part of all this is not what Rob Reiner did, but how many people, including himself, helped it happen by doing nothing. He remembers a particular film, a project that was supposed to bring together some of the most talented actors of that generation. There were promises of creative freedom, of telling a story that mattered. But behind the scenes, names were quietly crossed out, scripts rewritten, and voices erased. Rob's influence was everywhere, invisible but undeniable, like a shadow stretching across the set. Bruce recalls sitting in his trailer one day, overhearing a conversation between two producers who were worried about Rob's reaction to a certain actress being cast. The woman had a reputation for speaking her mind, for not playing the Hollywood game. By the next week, she was gone. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. Bruce says he still sees her face sometimes, the confusion, the hurt, and it makes him feel like he is carrying a ghost with him. His illness has given him too much time to think. He says when your body starts to betray you, the mind goes searching for meaning, for something to hold on to. And what he found were all the moments he stayed quiet when he should have been brave. He talks about how his fame became a shield, how being Bruce Willis meant he could walk through storms that would have destroyed others. That shield was given to him, in part by Rob, and Bruce took it without asking what it cost. He mentions a phone call he received years ago from a fellow actor, someone whose career had suddenly stalled. The voice on the other end was shaking, asking if Bruce knew what had happened, if he had done something wrong. Bruce didn't know. He knew it had nothing to do with talent or profs. Tears slide down Bruce's cheeks as he admits that he doesn't know if the people who were hurt will ever forgive him. He doesn't even know if he deserves forgiveness. All he knows is that the truth feels like the last thing he can give. His legacy, he says, should not just be explosions and catchphrases, but honesty, even when it hurts. The room feels smaller now, more intimate, as if the walls themselves are listening, and Bruce's voice, though fragile, carries a weight that makes it impossible to look away. Bruce seems to grow quieter, as though every word is now a small piece of himself he is carefully handing over. He says that one of the cruelest things about getting older and sicker is realizing how many chances you had to do the right thing, and how many of them you let slip by. He remembers walking past Rob Reiner on a studio lot years ago, both of them smiling for photographers, both of them playing their roles. In that moment, Bruce felt like he was looking at a stranger and an accomplice at the same time. That he talks about how Rob once confided in him that Hollywood was built on stories people tell the public and secrets they keep from themselves. Bruce didn't know what to say then. He knows now that Rob was talking about control, about shaping narratives so that no one ever sees the full picture. And Bruce was part of that picture, whether he wanted to be or not. There's a long pause where Bruce struggles to find the next sentence, and it is painful to watch because you can see the thought in his eyes but not the words on his lips. When they finally come, he says that one of the people he hurt the most was himself. Every time he stayed silent, every time he accepted another role knowing someone else had been pushed aside, he felt a piece of his own soul shrink. Fame filled the gap for a while, but it never healed it. He recalls running into Morgan Freeman. Bruce leans forward slightly, as if he is about to say something even more dangerous, something he's been holding back all this time, and the tension in the room feels almost unbearable. Type continue when you are ready for the next part. Bruce swallows hard, and when he finally speaks again, it feels like the room itself is leaning closer, afraid to miss a single breath. He says that what he's been circling around, what he has been too afraid to say plainly, is that the truth about Rob Reiner is not a single scandal or a single dark secret, but a long pattern of quiet influence that shaped lives without ever leaving fingerprints. It was never about something you could point to in court. It was about the way a phone call could end a career, the way a whisper could become a wall, the way a powerful man's disappointment could feel like a death sentence in an industry built on approval. Bruce admits there were moments when he benefited directly. Roles came to him that might have gone to others. Doors opened that should have stayed closed. And every time that happened, he felt a small stab of guilt that he buried under gratitude and fear. He tells a story about standing on a red carpet with Rob one night, flashes exploding around them, and realizing that everyone was smiling for the cameras while inside he was screaming. Because he knew that just beyond the velvet ropes were people who had once dreamed of being there, who had been quietly pushed out of the picture. His illness makes it harder to hide from those memories. He says sometimes he can't remember what he had for breakfast, but he can remember the look in a young actress's eyes when she told him she had lost a part she had been promised. She didn't ask him to fix it. She just asked if he knew why. Bruce lied to her. That lie still burns that he talks about his family again, about how his daughters now see him. Bruce's eyes close for a moment, as if he is gathering what little strength he has left, and when he opens them again, there is a vulnerability that feels almost unbearable to witness. He says that the hardest truth of all is not just what Rob Reiner did, but what it turned Bruce into. For years, he carried himself like a hero, confident, untouchable, while inside he was slowly becoming someone he didn't recognize, someone who could watch injustice and stay silent, because it was safer that way. That he talks about a night he will never forget, a night when he was supposed to speak up and didn't. A close friend of his, an actor he had known for decades, was suddenly removed from a project Rob was involved in. The reasons given were vague, almost insulting. Bruce knew the real story, knew it had nothing to do with talent or professionalism. His friend called him voice-breaking, asking if he could help. Bruce said he would try. He never did. He let the days pass. He let the silence grow. And eventually, the call stopped. That friendship never recovered. That is the kind of damage, Bruce says, that never shows up in headlines but changes you forever. Now, with his memory slipping and his words fading, those moments feel sharper than anything else. He says sometimes he dreams about standing in front of Rob Reiner, finally telling him everything he never said, finally asking him why so many people had to get hurt along the way. But in the dream, Rob never answers. He just smiles sadly, as if to say that this is how the world works. Bruce begins to cry openly now, not caring how it looks. He says he is tired of being strong. He is tired of pretending he was just a bystander. He wasn't. He was part of the system that allowed all of it to happen. And that is what he wants people to understand. That evil doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like silence, like comfort. He admits that there are days when he wakes up and doesn't recognize the man in the mirror. The face is his, but the life behind it feels distant, like a movie he once watched and can no longer remember clearly. In those moments, the only thing that feels real is the love of his family and the ache of everything he wishes he had done differently. He wishes he had been braver when it counted. He wishes he had chosen people over power. He wishes he had trusted that the truth, even when it hurts, is better than any lie that makes you comfortable. Bruce says he doesn't hate Rob Reiner. That surprises even him. What he feels instead is something sadder and more complicated. He feels the weight of two men who both loved storytelling, who both wanted to leave something behind, and who both got tangled in a system that rewards silence and punishes honesty. He says maybe Rob believed he was doing what he had to do. Maybe he told himself that the ends justified the means. Bruce says he told himself the same thing for too long. There's a soft sound off camera, one of his daughters shifting in her chair, and Bruce smiles faintly. He says that when he thinks about the future, he doesn't think about awards or box office records. He thinks about his children remembering him not as a perfect hero, but as a flawed man who finally tried to be real. He wants them to know that even when your voice starts to fade, your truth still matters. He looks back into the lens one last time, eyes wet but steady, and says that this is not a story about revenge or blame. It is a story about what happens when people stay quiet for too long and what it costs them in the end. It is about how secrets can live inside you for decades, shaping who you are, until one day you either let them out or they destroy you from the inside. Bruce takes a long, careful breath, as if he is holding on to the last O. F is strength, and says that if anyone watching this feels trapped by their own silence, he hopes his story gives them the courage to speak. Because no amount of fame, no amount of money, no amount of success is worth losing your soul. The room feels strangely peaceful now, like a storm that has finally passed. Bruce leans back slightly, exhausted but lighter, and for the first time since he began, there's a quiet acceptance in his eyes. Whatever comes next, whatever he forgets, whatever the world decides to do with his confession, he knows he has finally told the truth. And in that truth, fragile and imperfect as it is, there's a kind of freedom he never found in all his years as a Hollywood legend.